I'll give you a little bit of information on our first speaker. He's Louis Marascio, who is the Director of Engineering at the Cisco Unified Application Environment. He heads an engineering team, and he's responsible for designing and building the Cisco Unified Application Environment, which is a development and runtime platform for Cisco Unified Communication Solutions. So he's been with Cisco since June of 2006. And I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say. And please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Thanks much. Appreciate it. All right. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Louis Marascio. I'm with Cisco's Voice Technology Group. And this morning, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about Cisco's vision for developers, and how we want to enable you to leverage the platform that we're building around unified communications to build and innovate for yourselves and for your customers. Before I get too far into it, I want to remind you about what we believe to be kind of the 5 phases that customers and the market in general is going through as it transitions to IP telephony. And I don't want to belabor too much kind of the individual steps or phases on the timeline, but I want to point out something that I believe is important for everybody to realize. We all moved to IP telephony initially, at least it's posited, because of cost savings, because we can somehow reduce redundancies or converge networks or get rid of some circuits and do other things. But it's really the promise of some unbelievable benefit into the future, the promise of some sort of productivity enhancing application, or indeed some type of transformational application that gets customers excited about IP telephony, right? That gets customers excited about the time and energy investment required to deploy unified communications. And the interesting thing, I think, to point out about that is that business transformation doesn't come about simply because you deploy product. It comes about because people like yourselves, developers, build applications that are innovative, that are creative, that do things that we couldn't do before, right? It's because you guys had a good idea one day, or your business had a good idea or saw a market opportunity, and you went and attacked it, and you built something that turned out to be great. And Cisco's vision, and indeed the way that we see customers moving through, if you will, the 5 steps, not a 12-step, it's a 5-step process through their deployment of unified communications, it's because they transform the way they run their business and the way that they communicate within their business and with their customers. And if you think about, if you will, the landscape of applications, and this is obviously a drastic oversimplification and somewhat of a coarse-grained look at things, but if you break it down kind of roughly of what we see today, right? We generally see web-based applications, specifically consumer style applications, although there are certainly examples to the contrary, like Salesforce.com. But you see things like Facebook and Flickr and Skype and all of these great things that are generally delivered over the web, right? The cliche these days is, of course, Web 2.0, but I think we all know kind of deep down inside the essence of that statement. There's a specific speed and pace of innovation that is captured by these things, right? Facebook is a great example. When Facebook opened up their platform to developers, right? When they went through a series of kind of gates as they opened. First, they started, you had to be, in college, kind of related to an academic institution. Then they opened up to the broader world, and they eventually opened up to developers. When they opened up to developers, they saw about 5,000 custom applications get built by approximately 90,000 developers in 7 weeks, right? And that is phenomenal innovation, right? And there's so many of them, maybe 80% of them are total crap. Who cares? The point is that of those 5,000 applications, how many of them are solving real customer value? I bet a lot of them are doing something very unique and compelling. And indeed, these days, there are customers who have business models around building Facebook applications. The iPhone, of course, is another common example these days that is used. If you think about the enterprise has a set of other characteristics that drive a different set of requirements, right? The enterprise delivers, the utilities of the platform today, like security and reliability and scalability and stuff like that. Cisco's viewpoint is that many of these services are intelligent features delivered by the network, right? The network itself provides the basis, the foundation of these applications, right? Many times these applications are not very customizable, but they deliver and solve very complex, leading edge problems, if you will. Cisco's vision is to bring the best of both of these worlds, and specifically around unified communications. We want to enable kind of the pace of web-based innovation while leveraging the power of the Cisco network so that you can build quickly unique, compelling applications, but not have to sacrifice any form of reliability, redundancy, scalability, or anything else like that, right? And so how can we take kind of that vision and map it into what we believe to be kind of affectionately known as the Cisco Collaboration Architecture or the Cisco Unified Communications System? And there's only a couple things that I really want to point out on this slide, but the first thing is that we believe that this platform is more than just a premise solution, right? This is a premise solution and it's a cloud solution. And depending on what you're doing, you might be accessing capabilities in both at the same time. On the premise side, the kind of foundational component is, of course, Cisco Unified Communications Manager, right? It's the heart of that system, and it makes up the heart of the premise solution. On the cloud side, it's, of course, WebEx, right? WebEx is much more than just a web collaboration application. It's a cloud computing platform, right? And it's a global cloud computing platform. And it provides a platform that not only can Cisco and our products benefit from, but so can yours. And then as you move up that stack, I think, personally, the interesting thing is you'll notice that right there in the middle, there's a box across that says API. And it's not two distinct boxes on either side. There is a unified box across the top that provides a consistent, easy-to-use API, no matter whether you're accessing premise functionality or whether you're accessing on-demand cloud functionality. And from a developer perspective, that's very important because you shouldn't necessarily, while you could, you shouldn't necessarily have to be aware of where the capability or where the functionality is coming from. The other interesting thing here to point out is near the top. So we view things, or we view the world, if you will, in the context of workspaces, specifically collaborative workspaces. But one of the capabilities we want to enable is for you to be able to customize those workspaces, to build new workspaces that solve specific problems or provide a view of the world that's unique to you. The common word, again, to go along with the theme is, of course, a mashup. But what is it really? It's being able to build quickly, easily, and effectively a piece of software that's oftentimes thin client-based that reaches down into the guts of the platform where things might be a little bit more complicated, but reaches down into the guts of the platform and pulls out unique and interesting data and leverages unique and interesting capabilities and features to deliver a customized user experience to the end user, right? It's as simple as that. It boils down to giving the end user what they want, when they want it, and how they want it. So it's a fairly diverse platform, and as you can imagine, there's a number of ways that you can access it today, right? There's a number of ways that you can go and leverage the capabilities of the Cisco communications platform. I'll start at the top left and kind of work around fairly quickly. But from an on-demand perspective, WebEx, there's WebEx Connect, right? WebEx Connect, it's a thin client, customizable interface where you can basically build your own widgets that leverage data in the network without sacrificing or giving up any of the kind of built-in default unified communications capabilities. A recent announcement that we made, something that I think, especially when dealing with communications and large deployments, is known as the Application Extension Platform. And this really is the manifestation of the network as the platform. The application extension platform allows developers, again, all of you, to build software that runs inside our routers, right? You can write a program that can live inside our router and therefore benefit from the unique characteristics of that router. Where it's located, the fact that it's in a wiring closet and already has redundant power, the fact that it's on the network and has access to network features. All of these things that make it unique, make it valuable to you if you want to build an application that's highly distributed, right? Maybe it lives in 500 branches all at once. That's highly redundant and has unique survivable characteristics, right? If one goes down, they don't all go down kind of deal. In a contact center space, if there's any contact, I would call it a verticalized development environment if you want to build contact center applications. If you want to build IVRs, if you want to build inbound call treatment style applications, customer voice portal is what you'd want to use. But again, kind of bringing it back around to this is kind of more about just telephony. We have Smart Business Portal. Smart Business Portal is an application that you can build on top of that essentially allows you to create customized call center or contact center mashup dashboards, right? So you might have a dashboard, and using Web 2.0 style kind of JavaScript programming, you can build an application that shows individual in a business some data, some interesting information about what's going on, but also when calls come in or as they're handling calls, shows them information about that as well. Can integrate tightly with Salesforce and Microsoft CRM and other things. So these are all, those four examples: WebEx Connect, Application Extension Platform, Customer Voice Portal, and Smart Business Portal. They're all fairly specific kinds of development environments, right? The last one up here, I'm sort of biased, of course. The Cisco Unified Application Environment is what I would call a horizontal development platform for Cisco Unified Communications. We sit across the entire architecture and make available its capabilities to you as developers. And that's the one I want to talk a little bit more about. So the Cisco Unified Application Environment, to kind of boil it down into 2 or 3 sentences, is an end-to-end development platform that provides everything you need to develop, deploy, and manage applications on top of Cisco Unified Communications, right? It provides a runtime container, namely the application server, and application server is exactly what it is. It will host code that you build and provide service to applications running across the network. But it also provides a comprehensive set of media processing functionality, right? So horizontal media processing functionality that you can pick and choose from as you build your application. You don't have to know up front exactly what you want to do. If you need a little bit of conferencing, if you need a little bit of IVR, a little bit of speech rec, you can pick and choose and combine that in with the application that you're building. And then finally, if you'd like to use a visual development environment, there's also commonly known as a service creation environment, but you can call it an application designer, a visual application designer, so that you can very quickly and easily create customized applications in a drag-and-drop style interface. But that's not the only way you can do it, right? There's numerous ways you can do it. In our vision on the Unified Application Environment team, and really across Cisco, especially Unified Communications, where we have a heavy emphasis on developers, is we want to enable you to effectively access our services in a consistent, easy-to-use manner in the way that you want to do it, right? And so you'll hear about here in a minute some of the work we've done to make sure that it doesn't feel like you're having to conform to the way that we want you to build an application. We want to give you the tools to allow you to use the platforms and techniques you're used to using when you go to develop applications on top of the platform. So I've got listed here kind of 4, call them major themes, call them core values, call them whatever you'd like to call them. But this is kind of how we structure when we think about building product for developers. This is what we think about. And on the bottom, really making up the foundation of our approach is developer experience. And if you think about user experience has gotten a lot of play, especially since Apple has rejoined the take over the world kind of effort, and they've started to take over the world again. But user experience is something that we place a lot of time and effort into at Cisco, and many companies place a lot of time and effort into when they design product. But oftentimes, when it comes to developers, they don't place as much time in thinking about the developer experience. What is the developer experience? Well, the developer experience, you can almost think of it as just the user experience for developers, but it's really about, are the APIs consistent? Are the method parameters consistent? Are they documented in a consistent way? Do the exceptions follow a similar styling convention? Do they have the same semantics? All of these things that you experience when you're typing code in on a daily basis, that's the developer experience, right? And more importantly, the way we view it is we want to come to you with our capabilities. We want to come to you and say, here's everything that you can do. Use it how you'd like to use it. And what that means is your tools and your environment, right? If you want to use Java and IntelliJ, go for it. If you want to use, C# and Visual Studio 2005 or 2008, go for it, right? It's your choice. And then the second kind of pillar here is what we call accessibility. It's not accessibility in the sense that, the font has to be big enough to be read kind of thing. It's accessibility in the sense that if there's something inside of our platform that is interesting to third-party developers, it should be accessible via an API. You should be able to get to it to do what you want to do, right? A good example of that is, let's say we provide a tool that you can use to install an application or to start and stop a service inside of the unified application environment, right? It's likely that tool is using some kind of API behind the scenes, right? As developers, that's kind of what we do. We build APIs, we build object models. And there is probably very little reason why that API should not be accessible to you. And so our mission is to make sure that it is, so that if you wanted to provide, instead of using our tool to install an application, if you wanted to script that as part of your Install Shield installer, for example, you should be able to, right? There should be an API to do it. As we move up the stack here, we get to extensibility. And extensibility is really an extension of accessibility. And a good way to think about this is a management environment. Pretend we have a management console, and inside that console, there exists a particular type of module, and you want to add a new type of module. Why shouldn't you be able to do that, right? And so as we build product, we are always looking for plug-in points. We're always looking for ways to allow you to extend it, because the last thing that we want to do is build artificial barriers because we weren't thinking about it in terms of what does the developer need. So we want to make sure that if you kind of have a great idea and you said, I wish I could do X, Y, and Z, we're never going to get it right all the time, like 100%. But by giving it some thought, we can enable much more creativity when it comes to third-party developers. And then finally, reach. And reach, specifically to us, in our way of thinking, is very much a reminder that this is more than just call control. This is more than just Unified Communications Manager. This is about presence. It's about instant messaging, right? Being able to know where you're at in a geospatial sense. It's about all of these things. All of these things make up, in our world, unified communications. And all of these functions and capabilities should be surfaced when we talk about that consistent, easy-to-use API. So I want to talk real quick about the release 2.5 that we just came out with that's going to be available here in October. And I want to tell you a little bit about what's in it, because it plays to these themes specifically. And it plays to specifically bringing developers or giving developers what they need to build on top of the Cisco platform. And the first one was what we call language independence. And you would remember from a couple of slides ago, I talked about the Unified Application Designer. And the Unified Application Designer is kind of a purpose-built IDE that provided a visual development environment. And it's great for what it does, but it's not necessarily perfect for every developer. So one of the major features here for Release 2.5 was language independence, making sure that if you wanted to access the capabilities of the Unified Communication System, you could do it in the language of your choice. Obviously, that's in quotes until we support all the languages out there. But the first two that we supported, Java and C#, cover a very large portion of the developers that are out there today. And then we'll be adding C, Python, and Ruby support here in the coming months. And it basically allows you to, take Java and start writing code. It's as simple as that. And we've built some fairly important technology for ourselves to do this that I'll talk about here in a minute. And kind of consistent with Cisco's strategy as far as being open, we did something interesting with that technology. The second was the management architecture. And the reason why I put this up here, because it really plays to the accessibility and the extensibility point on the previous slide. We built an entirely new user interface for administrators to access the system. But when we did that, we did not, the first thing that we did was design the API. We did not design the UI. And basically where we ended up was that this very large Java web application uses an API that we built called our management API, but that API is public. In other words, anything that our management application can do, you can do from code. Right. Absolutely anything, 100%, soup to nuts. If you click a button in the management application and it does A, B, and C, then there will be equivalent method calls inside the API to do A, B, and C. And if it doesn't, then that's a bug and a problem. We'll fix it. And finally, to talk about the reach point of view, expanded Cisco UC plugin support. We've added in this release what we call our messaging API. And the messaging API is a unified API across Cisco messaging products, Unity, Cisco Unity, and Cisco Unity Connection. And these are essentially unified messaging and voicemail products. And there's now an API through the Cisco Unified Application Environment for you to access the capabilities of that messaging system. You can send and receive voicemails and unified messages. You can delete, add, manage, do all kinds of great stuff. One API to access disparate products on the back end with a consistent, easy-to-use API with similar semantics across both. And I think one of the things that I like to point out, because I came from a company that wasn't Cisco, right, 2.5 years ago. And prior to being Cisco myself, I was one of you. I was building on top of Cisco product. Cisco has not always been great at ensuring backwards compatibility. But one of the things that we do now is, especially on the Unified Application Environment team, is we build with backwards compatibility in mind. So we did this whole release, major features, 100% backwards compatibility. If you built something on the previous release, it will continue to work into the future. I like to point that out because I know about the time and investment that third parties go through when they build applications, especially ISVs when they're not just building a one-off, but they're building a product. And it's important that we retain that functionality going into the future. So I mentioned earlier on the language independence that one of the things that we wanted to enable was third parties building applications in any language that they like. And to do that, we created a technology that we called Edge. It was announced back in May. It actually had fairly broad, kind of somewhat surprising coverage on the internet. But what we did is we took this very important piece of technology, I mean, absolutely critical to the function of our product. If this didn't exist, our product could not function, and we gave it away, right? And so 2 weeks ago, I think, it was accepted or voted into the Apache Incubator. It will be an Apache Incubator project, and will hopefully one day graduate to kind of top-level Apache status. And this is consistent with Cisco's kind of modus operandi, if you will, about giving back, right? We're active contributors, and I don't think anybody could, to this point, question Cisco's contribution to the protocol community, to the internet community, right? We're part of IETF. We employ several of the primary contributors to the SIP protocol. But when it came to developers, we hadn't done a whole lot, right? We'd done some stuff, but not a ton. And this represents, I think, one of what will be many major contributions to the open source community, especially around developer technology, right? And not in any way, form, or fashion is it simply a fig leaf. This is now going to be owned by Apache. We have given away a piece of core technology, and we no longer control it, which I think is fairly indicative of a major commitment. So let's pretend that you go through this time and effort, and you've built an application, and you want to figure out how to work with Cisco. right? And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I want to point out that there's, especially when it comes to the Cisco Unified Application Environment, there's numerous ways to get close to Cisco. And we obviously have a developer program and a developer portal and all kinds of things, but we do everything from bundling third-party applications, right? Kind of consistent with what you might see when you buy a PC and it kind of comes bundled with McAfee and some other things, all the way down to simply doing marketing arrangements, and everything in the middle, right? Either reselling or OEM and all kinds of stuff. So I would urge you, if you're interested in that, to log on to what's known as the Cisco Developer Portal, and I'll talk about that in a minute, and you can get some more information on that. But let's look at two examples of what some real customers are doing with Cisco Unified Communications today and their custom applications. And the first one I want to talk about is in the healthcare industry. And the healthcare industry is obviously carries with it some fairly robust requirements, especially around reliability and redundancy and whatnot. But it also carries with it, right? If you've ever had an X-ray done, you would probably be amazed at the number of people involved in not only examining that X-ray, but then collaborating on all of the potential root causes, if you will, of what they may see. And this application is essentially about improving the collaboration between radiologist and physician, right? And in the old world, if I'm looking at X-rays on my screen in my PACS workspace, I might see something and need to call the referring physician. I'm going to have to go look that up in a directory, right? He may or may not be in the hospital. He or she may or may not be on call, right? You never know. And so what this application did is it will dynamically now build a buddy list based on presence. It will show you whether that person is available or not and provide an automatic login to the IP phone sitting next to you so that you can click to call them, talk to them, and if you need to escalate that into a conference, you can hit another button, add additional people to the call, and then you have a collaborative conference so you can all kind of work on the problem at once and see what's going on, right? It's a fairly simple example of transforming the way that poor radiologist did business and saving them significant time and effort and just trying to communicate with somebody. And it is an example of taking unified communications and embedding it into something that already existed, right? Because this PACS workspace and all of the software to kind of examine those X-rays was pre-existing, right? And they embedded Cisco Unified Communications into it using the APIs we made available to them. The second example is a little different. This is about a small software company, a small systems integrator. They're about 6 to 8 employees. And they're out there day to day pounding the pavement, selling Cisco solutions. And they use the product that they sell. And they said, hey, why, we have to provide certain SLAs to our customers, right? We have to, if a customer has a problem, we've got to provide, a 1-hour SLA and answer the phone and all kinds of stuff. But why shouldn't they be able to customize their unified communications deployment to make that easier? And so what they did was they built an application, a fairly straightforward application, that when a call comes in to their customer support line, their application built on top of the unified application environment will answer it and will move through a series of steps where they record the customer's ID, look them up in Salesforce, record the problem description from the customer, attach that problem description to the Salesforce record, and then initiate several outbound calls to support personnel so that they can get someone working on that case as fast as possible. But for them, the motivating factor was, we need to provide this SLA without staffing up a large support desk, and we need to provide it potentially 24/7. How can we do that without hiring people? How can we have the technology work for us? And they were able to do that using the unified application environment and Cisco Unified Communications. The last thing I want to talk to you about is the Cisco developer community. And this is a pretty big deal. It launched back in July. And the reason why it's a big deal is because it's something Cisco has never, ever, ever done. There is now a place for developers to go. And it's kind of amazing to say, previous to this, we're in 2008 now, previous to this, there really was nowhere for you to go If you visit the Cisco website, there was no place for you to go to get information. There's now a modern developer portal, kind of akin to MSDN, that allows a one-stop shop for developers. It has everything you might need as a developer. It has forums, it has documentation, it has public wikis, it has public issue trackers. It is your conduit to Cisco product teams. We make heavy use of this on the Unified Application Environment team, and it has dramatically increased the amount of content we can get into your hands, because when a developer has an idea for a new example application, he can publish it onto the wiki very fast. Same goes for you. It's a public wiki. Same deal. If you want to contribute, you can. So the developer community is a big deal, and it's kind of the point of our spear as we go and kind of try to attack, if you will, the developer marketplace, right? And behind that, we have a developer services organization that's there to provide additional support around the world. We have now innovation centers, we call them, around the world to provide developer services around interop verification, scalability testing, all kinds of other things. Again, services we make available to you so that we can help you build applications on top of the platform that are robust and that will meet the customer's needs. And the reason why we're doing that, quite honestly, is because when you kind of mix all of these stuff we're doing around trying to build open APIs and development platforms and, being more transparent around documentation and issue tracking, all that great stuff, and you mix it with a really active developer community, one where it's more than just kind of us saying stuff, and it's really kind of a conversation between the participants. It really, I mean, as hokey as it sounds, it turns into kind of infinite possibilities, right? There is no limit, if you will, to the types and quality of software that you guys can build, especially when working closely with Cisco, and especially given Cisco's commitment to being open so that you can do that. So with that, I'd like to thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Come see us out in the exhibit hall. I don't know what booth we are, but it should be fairly obvious. And thank you very much.